What kind of love begins with a contract? And why does she still say yes? The question echoes through the frozen silence of the Colorado mountains as the old year dies beneath the weight of snow and fear. Caroline Dawson stands inside the narrow cabin where the wind claws at the walls like something alive. And she wonders if this is the moment her life ends, or the moment it truly begins. The winter has stripped everything down to bone and shadow. Samuel Dawson, once a man who could lift timber with his bare hands, now lies weak beneath a worn quilt, breath shallow, strength fading a little more with each passing night. Caroline has grown used to silence, to the brittle way the air changes when there is no food left to cook, no wood left to burn, and no hope left to reach for. The Foster brothers circle like wolves, waiting for the new year to strike, the legal moment when debt becomes their weapon. Their hands are clean, their hunger is not. And Caroline knows they intend to swallow the Dawson land whole. So when the stranger rides in on a snow-dusted horse, he might as well have arrived from another world. Mason Hale is not loud. He does not force himself across the threshold. He simply stands there in the dim glow of lamplight, hat shadowing eyes that look like they have measured storms and chosen not to run. He speaks with a calm that feels dangerous, not because it threatens her, but because it threatens the lies she tells herself about what choices she still has. He does not mention love. He does not say anything pretty. Instead, he speaks about survival, about partnership, about Silver Ridge, a ranch tucked in the high country where winter is harsh but life is still possible. He tells her she is strong, that he respects her, that he needs someone who can work beside him, not behind him. In return, he offers what she has no words for, a way out. Food, safety, care for her father. Debts erased before the New Year bell tolls. It sounds almost like a rescue, but it is also a cage. Caroline feels the truth like a blade against the skin. This is not a romance. This is a transaction wrapped in decency. She listens to Mason explain that she may leave after a year if the burden becomes too heavy. He will not touch her without consent. He will not own her voice. And still, this is marriage. A vow spoken in the shadow of necessity. A choice made under winter's gun. That night, when Mason leaves the cabin so she can think, the silence becomes unbearable. She sits beside Samuel and watches the faint rise and fall of his chest. He is fading, and she knows something he will not admit, that he is already half in the next world. What he leaves behind will either be swept away by men like the Fosters or protected by decisions she alone can make. The question forms again, what kind of daughter lets her father die in fear? The snow deepens, the wind howls, and somewhere outside, the year prepares to end. Caroline does not sleep. She thinks of the little girl she once was, running through warm fields before the land grew cold. She thinks of promises she made to herself, that she would never belong to anyone but her own heart. Then she thinks of Samuel's hands in hers. When dawn bleeds pale across the sky, she chooses. Not for love, not for fantasy, for survival, for duty, for a different kind of freedom, the brutal kind that costs everything. She tells Mason yes. The word lands like a gunshot in a prayer. Samuel tries to protest, but his voice breaks under the weight of truth. He knows what the new year will bring if she refuses. So instead of arguing, he blesses her with a trembling hand, and Caroline feels her childhood end in that moment. The girl is gone. Only the woman remains. The morning of the wedding is stripped bare of ceremony. No flowers, no guests. Just breath turning to frost and boots crunching against ice as they prepare to leave. Mason gives her space, like he promised. He does not try to comfort her with false warmth. He simply saddles the horses and waits. Caroline steps outside, carrying nothing but a small bag, a rifle, and the iron courage she has learned to wear like a second skin. The rising sun cuts through mist and snow, lighting the world in hard silver. It is the beginning of a new year. And as the first light reaches the cabin, she whispers goodbye to the only life she has ever known. She climbs onto the horse, not as a bride in lace, but as a woman walking willingly into uncertainty. Their journey begins in silence. Hooves crack through ice. The mountains rise around them like old gods. Mason rides slightly ahead, saying little, never looking back to see if she falters. Somehow, that steadiness feels like respect rather than indifference. He trusts her to ride. He trusts her not to break. And that trust, unexpected, unspoken, begins to change something inside her. As the valley falls behind, the truth becomes clearer. This is not just about dead, not just about winter. It is about two people standing at the edge of the world, daring to choose each other in a way that defies expectation and social law. Their marriage is not built on romance. It is built on shared defiance against forces larger than them. Greed, hunger, power, the inevitability of loss. Love across boundaries does not always start with warmth. Sometimes it begins with a bargain in the snow. Sometimes it begins when a woman refuses to surrender and a man refuses to own her. And somewhere deep beneath the ice, something fragile and human takes root. By the time Silver Ridge lifts from the horizon like a promise wrapped in winter light, Caroline knows there is no turning back. The old year is gone. The new one has begun. And the price of survival is now written into her life forever. The mountains rise higher as they travel, sharp against the pale winter sky, and the wind carries the smell of pine and cold stone. Caroline keeps her gaze forward, because looking back would only remind her of everything she has already left behind. The silence between her and Mason is not empty. It is patient, steady, filled with the weight of things not yet spoken. Each mile takes them deeper into the high country, and deeper into a life she has chosen but does not yet understand. She studies him from the corner of her eye when she can. Mason rides like a man carved from the land itself, posture balanced, movements precise. He does not rush, he does not fidget. He watches the world as if danger can come from anywhere, and he intends to meet it head-on. There is mystery in that calm. It is not the silence of absence, but the silence of someone who has learned long ago that words are not shields. Their horses move through drifts that crunch beneath hooves. Snowlight reflects off everything, so bright it hurts. Conversation would normally fill such a journey, but neither of them pretends. This is not courtship. It is navigation. Two lives adjusting, circling, testing whether they can occupy the same fragile ground. Mason asks if she is warm enough, if the saddle is comfortable, if Samuel has enough provisions now that the debts are handled. She answers simply. She thanks him without softness. There is dignity in how they speak. Two people refusing to wound each other with politeness they do not mean. As the trail climbs, the world opens. Silver Ridge appears first as a line of dark trees, then as an entire valley unfolding like a secret. A frozen river cuts through the meadow, shining like glass. Stretching beyond it are acres upon acres of open range, bordered by forest and guarded by the spine of the Rockies. Fences run straight and true. Barn roofs hold a lace of snow. Smoke curls from a great lodge built of timber and stone, solid against the sky. It is not poverty, it is not desperation. It is power, worn quietly. Caroline feels her breath catch. All this time she had imagined something small, a remote shack, a lonely man holding on by fingernails. But this is a world. And Mason Hale stands at the center of it like someone who never needed saving in the first place. For a moment, fear stirs. Has she been naive? Was she chosen? Or merely convenient? Mason slows his horse and turns to her. His voice remains calm, carefully measured. He tells her he hid the scale of Silver Ridge because wealth attracts the wrong kind of loyalty, and he has no patience left for pretense. He chose her because she fights for the people she loves. Because she doesn't follow power. Because she didn't bend when life tried to break her. It is not flattery. It is truth spoken plainly. That honesty settles inside her like warmth. When they reach the ranch yard, workers pause to look, not with mockery or judgment, but quiet curiosity. Ben Larson, broad-shouldered and weathered by years of trail dust, greets Mason with firm respect. When he turns to Caroline, his expression softens. He tips his hat as if acknowledging not just a woman, but a partner. Martha Collins appears at the lodge doorway, apron dusted with flour, gaze sharp enough to measure a soul within seconds. She studies Caroline, then nods in approval, as if deciding she will do just fine. Inside the lodge, heat wraps around her like a blanket. Firelight glows against polished wood beams. The house speaks of practicality, not luxury. Heavy tables, sturdy chairs, blankets folded with care. It feels lived in. It feels like work is done here, meals are shared here, decisions are made here that matter. She realizes this marriage is not only a bargain, it is a test. Over the next days, the rhythm of Silver Ridge reveals itself. Dawn begins in cold blue darkness. Men ride out to check the herd. Mason moves among them without swagger, doing as much work as anyone else, asking for no more and no less. He consults Ben. He relies on Martha's judgment inside the lodge. His authority is not loud. It is earned, held in the quiet way others listen when he finally does speak. Caroline watches, learns, steps into the work because standing still feels wrong. She helps with inventory, learns how supplies are stored, how livestock is managed through the winter, how the books are kept. She discovers that Mason keeps meticulous ledgers, not for greed, but for responsibility. Nothing here is accidental. Every piece matters. And slowly, without meaning to, she becomes part of the pattern. She still carries fear of belonging, of failing, of waking one day to discover this life can crumble as quickly as the one she left. There are moments when her chest tightens and the air feels thin. But then Mason appears in the doorway or passes her in the hall, offering conversation that is simple yet real. He never rushes her. He never demands she smile. He gives space where another man might take. Trust grows, fragile but persistent. At night, when the wind presses against the windows, Caroline lies awake and listens. She thinks about boundaries, class, money, expectation, and how easily they can trap people in lives that never felt like theirs to begin with. Yet here she is, on land that should divide them, instead beginning to feel like neutral ground. A love story does not always begin with desire. Sometimes it begins with recognition. Still, shadows gather. She notices the tension in Mason's jaw when certain documents cross his desk. She hears names spoken in low tones, Leonard Hale and his son Victor. She learns that their wealth is louder, their ambition wider, and that Silver Ridge is the last piece Mason refuses to surrender to the Hale Empire. He protects this place not for pride, but for legacy. The idea that land should feed people, not consume them. She understands then, he is not simply guarded, he is at war. And by marrying him, she has stepped onto the battlefield. Yet she does not retreat. Because even now, even as uncertainty circles like winter wolves, there is strength in knowing that neither of them stands alone anymore. Silver Ridge holds secrets, but it also holds promise. And Caroline Dawson, who once faced the new year with nothing but fear, now stands inside a house where choices still matter, and where the future, terrifying and fragile, waits quietly to be claimed. Winter tightens its grip on Silver Ridge just as the first ripple of trouble arrives, carried not by wind or snow, but by ink and legal seals. The message comes by courier, formal, intrusive, and heavy with intent. Leonard Hale has filed a petition for conservatorship, claiming Mason is mentally unfit to manage Silver Ridge. It is not a simple challenge. It is a declaration of war, thinly disguised behind polite language and official signatures. Caroline watches Mason read the documents at the dining table, the firelight casting long shadows across his face. He doesn't rage, he doesn't curse. Instead, he goes very still, like a man listening for distant thunder. She realizes this silence is not strength alone. It is preparation. Leonard is not simply testing him. He is trying to erase him, to take everything Mason stands for and fold it into the Hale Empire, the way snow swallows footprints. The air in the room changes. Ben stands a little straighter. Martha stops wiping the counter. Everyone knows what this means. Leonard has money, influence, lawyers who speak the language of power like it is their birthright. A sudden marriage to a woman with nothing? To men like Leonard, it is not proof of courage. It is ammunition. Caroline feels the target close over her as clearly as she feels the cold. The first assault is social. Whispered letters. Curious visitors pretending politeness while measuring her worth like currency. People begin to ask questions that sound harmless, but are meant to wound. Where is she from? What does she bring? Why would Mason marry someone with no name, no status, and no fortune unless he had lost his mind? Or unless she manipulated him? She answers calmly, refusing to break. But after each conversation, she walks alone for a long time in the snow, steadying her breath. Reputation in the West is as sharp as a blade, and once it cuts, the scar remains. Then the law arrives. Officers step onto Silver Ridge, polite and distant, carrying summons for Mason's presence in court. Leonard's petition claims emotional instability, reckless decision-making, and susceptibility to manipulation. Words like unfit and unsound judgment stain the page. The marriage is named, not as a partnership, but as evidence. That night, Mason tells Caroline she does not have to stand in the courtroom. She can stay at the ranch, protect herself from the spectacle. He says it softly, not because he doubts her strength, but because he wants to shield her from cruelty. She refuses, not out of pride, but because this fight is about her too. When they ride to town, the streets already carry the scent of judgment. Women linger in shop doorways. Men pause mid-conversation. Eyes follow them like shadows. In the courthouse hallway, Caroline sees the hale entourage. Expensive coats, polished boots, smiles honed like knives. Leonard stands among them. White hair meticulously groomed, expression composed, confidence radiating like he already owns the verdict. He greets Mason with smooth politeness, but his gaze lingers on Caroline. Assessing, calculating, dismissing. She realizes in that instant that Leonard does not believe in people. He believes in control. And people who cannot be controlled become liabilities. The courtroom becomes a theater. Leonard's lawyer speaks in careful tones about concern for family welfare, about how grief and isolation may have clouded Mason's judgment, about how a sudden marriage to a woman with no background might indicate irrational behavior. They don't accuse Caroline directly. They don't have to. Her existence is the accusation. Witnesses are called. Doctors talk about emotional strain. Social acquaintances describe Mason as withdrawn, unpredictable, difficult. Every word is a thread, and together they try to weave a picture of a man losing his grip. Caroline feels the tension coil inside her chest. But when Mason takes the stand, he doesn't argue. He doesn't attack. He answers each question with quiet clarity. He explains the ranch operations, the financial planning, the winter strategies. He lists long-term goals, responsibilities, and management choices in a voice steady as a river. His competence is undeniable. But Leonard's lawyer presses. Why this woman? Why now? What other explanation but desperation? Caroline's name becomes an object passed around the room. And then it is her turn. The courtroom quiets as she steps forward. She feels every gaze, every doubt. Her palms are warm despite the cold. She tells the truth with measured control about Samuel's illness, the debt, the winter, the offer Mason made. She doesn't dress it in romance. She doesn't pretend. She says the words survival and duty, because that is what it was, what it still is. But then she speaks of respect, of how Mason never once treated her as inferior, of how he trusted her judgment before the first day had even begun, of how the strength of a marriage is not measured by flowers and courtship, but by honesty and the refusal to own or be owned. Her voice does not rise. She does not plead. She simply refuses to be ashamed of the life she chose. Ben and Martha testify next. They speak not with legal polish, but with hard-won truth. Silver Ridge works because Mason works, because he leads without cruelty, because he earns loyalty instead of buying it. The tide begins to shift. Then Catherine Reeves, Mason's attorney, steps forward with precision. She produces ledgers, contracts, reports, financial records from Hale Holdings that suggest mismanagement, irregularities that shift the courtroom's focus like a sudden storm wind. Her questions slice cleanly. Leonard's composure narrows into tension. This is not about care. This is about acquisition. By the time closing statements arrive, the room no longer vibrates with certainty. The judge listens in silence, weighing family against justice, emotion against evidence. The pause before he speaks feels endless. Caroline holds her breath. Then the decision falls. The petition is denied. Mason Hale is declared fully competent. An investigation into Leonard's finances is authorized. Justice, rare and bright, lands like sunlight piercing winter clouds. There is no applause. Just a release of air, shoulders lowering, eyes closing in relief. Leonard masks his fury behind civility, but the truth has already cracked his foundation. He leaves without looking back. Outside the courthouse, the world feels different. Mason turns to Caroline, not triumphant, but grateful. And she realizes this was never about winning power. It was about keeping the right to live on their own terms, without chains disguised as protection. Silver Ridge remains theirs, but so does the weight of what comes next. Because once you defy a man like Leonard Hale, the war does not simply end. It changes shape. And Caroline Dawson, who once only fought for survival, now stands ready to fight for something deeper. Freedom, dignity, and the fragile, dangerous beginnings of love. The snow hardens into glass as winter drags on, and with it, the shape of the battle changes. Leonard Hale does not retreat. He simply shifts strategy, the way men with influence always do. When the courts fail him, he turns to quieter weapons: money, pressure, reputation. Bribes arrive first. Mason receives letters written in refined, impeccable handwriting, offering generous buyouts that would make any rational man surrender. The sums grow larger each time, and each time, Mason burns the letter in the hearth without a word. Caroline watches the flames swallow the paper, watches the smoke rise, and understands that refusing wealth is not easy. It is a slow, deliberate sacrifice. Then the threats begin. Not open, not crude. They arrive wrapped in politeness, contract clauses that would tighten around Silver Ridge like a rope, business associates hinting that suppliers might stop honoring agreements, whispers in town implying that a sensible man would hand control to professionals. Leonard's empire moves like a shadow creeping over the valley. He wants them cornered, dependent, isolated. But Caroline refuses to bend. She speaks with Ben and Martha late into the night. They gather records, strengthen alliances, create contingency plans. Mason consults Catherine Reeves, whose eyes sharpen with every legal maneuver Leonard deploys. The ranch itself becomes a fortress of quiet resilience. Workers stand a little closer. Communication becomes more deliberate. Trust turns from habit into lifeline. And still, Leonard attempts a more personal strike. One morning, a polished carriage arrives unannounced. Victor Hale steps out, his charm carefully arranged, his smile just a little too perfect. He asks to speak with Caroline alone. Mason does not insist on staying, though every muscle in his body tightens. Caroline agrees, not because she trusts Victor, but because she refuses to hide. Victor offers a future dressed in silk, money, security, social acceptance. He frames it as rescue. Leave the ranch, take a generous settlement, free Mason from her influence, restore order to the family. He makes it sound reasonable, noble even. And beneath it all lies the belief that everything has a price, that dignity is just another commodity. Caroline looks at him and understands the difference between wealth and worth. Her refusal is simple, calm, final. She tells him that her marriage is not a mistake, nor a bargaining chip. She does not belong to the Hale Empire. She never will. For a brief moment, Victor's pleasant mask cracks, revealing irritation and something colder. When he leaves, she feels the air shift again. Now they know they cannot buy her. That makes her dangerous. The attack escalates. Business partners pull away. Rumors rise like dust storms. Mason becomes the subject of endless speculation, a reckless man, a stubborn fool, a lost soul clinging to outdated values. Caroline becomes the symbol of corruption in their story, the woman who led him astray. The social circles where the Hales hold court repeat these narratives until they feel like truth. Yet even as the world attempts to shrink them, Caroline and Mason draw closer, not in dramatic confessions or sweeping romance, but in the quiet gravity of two people choosing to stay. They talk, they plan, they work side by side, their movements synchronizing until partnership becomes instinct. Mason's guarded strength steadies her. Caroline's unwavering resolve steadies him. Their connection is not loud, but its presence fills every space between them. Catherine digs deeper into Leonard's empire. She uncovers shell companies, hidden debts, financial manipulation disguised as strategy. Each discovery adds weight to a growing case that Leonard is not a protector of wealth, but a manipulator willing to destroy anything he cannot own. The truth is a storm gathering on the horizon, silent but inevitable. Then comes the meeting that changes everything. Catherine calls them together. Mason, Caroline, Ben, Martha. Papers cover the table. Names, numbers, timelines. Leonard's world is not as solid as he pretends. He has been playing a dangerous game with investors, shifting funds, obscuring losses. If exposed, the empire will fracture. The realization lands like thunder. This was never just about Silver Ridge. It was about control. If Mason refuses to fold, Leonard risks losing everything. Mason considers the cost. Exposure will ruin reputations, tear apart old alliances, destroy a dynasty. It is not a small decision. Caroline watches him weigh it and recognizes the burden he carries, not only as a landowner, but as a man raised inside that powerful name. He finally speaks. His voice is low, steady. He will not destroy Leonard out of vengeance, but he will not let corruption go unanswered. If the truth leads to collapse, that collapse belongs to Leonard alone. The confrontation is private, but seismic. Mason meets Leonard face to face. There are no witnesses, only two men who share blood and history and diverging values. Leonard frames his actions as duty, as inevitability, as the cost of success. Mason answers simply, he will not sell, he will not bow. And if Leonard continues to pressure him, the truth will surface in full daylight. When Mason leaves that room, he does so without anger, without regret. He has chosen his life, and the cost is clear. In the following weeks, pressure fades. Not entirely, but enough. Investors sense instability. Leonard diverts his attention inward, scrambling to hold his kingdom together. Legal noise dwindles. Social speculation shifts elsewhere. The storm does not vanish, but it passes over Silver Ridge without claiming it. And through it all, Caroline remains. Not as ornament, not as scandal, but as equal. Workers now come to her with questions. Martha treats her as partner, not guest. Ben listens when she speaks of strategy. The ranch beats with a shared heart, resilience born of unity. One evening, as winter edges toward thaw, Caroline stands on the porch and looks out over the frozen fields. Mason joins her in silence. The sky glows with the last light of day, soft and golden against snow. They do not speak of love. They do not need to. The bond between them feels like breath, quiet, constant, undeniable. They have refused to sell their lives. They have refused to surrender their freedom. And as the world slowly loosens its hold, something fragile and powerful continues to grow, steady as the land beneath their feet, eternal as the mountains surrounding them. Winter loosens its grasp in small, almost shy ways. Ice thins along the river. The air softens. Light lingers a little longer each evening, as if the sky itself is slowly remembering how to breathe again. Silver Ridge survives the season not through luck, but through stubborn, shared effort. The ranch does not simply stand, it endures. And somewhere within that endurance, something deeper grows between Caroline and Mason, steady and unspoken, like the mountains rising above them. There is no sudden confession, no dramatic moment where love bursts into flame. Instead, it creeps in through the rhythm of work and presence, through small gestures. A cup of coffee left warming by the stove, a blanket placed over weary shoulders, quiet laughter that begins to visit the house more often than fear. Caroline learns the land in every season, how cattle shift with the wind, how the forest holds moisture, how early thaw can trick even the strongest rider. Mason listens when she suggests new methods, new records, new ways of planning for the future, and he doesn't just tolerate her involvement, he relies on it. They begin to make decisions together, not as protector and dependent, not as master and guest, but as partners. The workers see it first. They look to both of them now. Ben discusses operations with Caroline as naturally as he does with Mason. Martha talks with her about supply ordering, about finances, about staff needs. Caroline is no longer a stranger whose presence requires explanation. She is woven into the structure of Silver Ridge, strong thread among strong thread. Sometimes Caroline walks the ridges alone, letting the wind move through her thoughts. She reflects on the woman she used to be, the one who believed survival and sacrifice were the same thing, the one who thought marriage meant losing yourself. And she realizes that what she has gained here is not just safety. It is purpose. It is belonging. It is the ability to shape the world immediately around her with her own hands. And Mason changes too, not dramatically. Not in ways the world would easily see, but the armor he wears grows lighter. His voice warms, his gaze lingers when she enters a room. He trusts her with the darker parts of his past, the expectations he grew up under, the way Leonard's shadow shaped him, the fear that he would one day become hard in the same ways he despised. Caroline listens, and for the first time in his life, Mason is not standing alone against the storm. Their bond no longer feels like resistance. It feels like home. Still, the echoes of the past do not vanish. Leonard's investigation spreads quietly through the region. Business partners hesitate. The empire he built trembles under scrutiny. People whisper, not about Mason now, but about Leonard. Pride begins to fracture under the weight of truth. Victor grows distant. Invitations stop. The Hale name no longer guarantees reverence. Mason does not gloat. He does not celebrate another man's downfall. Instead, he works. He rebuilds fence lines. He tends livestock. He strengthens the ranch not for reputation, but for the people who live and labor here. For the land itself. One evening, after a long day of thawing mud and stubborn cattle, Caroline returns to the lodge to find the table set, candles flickering in the soft glow of firelight. It is simple, not grand. Mason stands there awkwardly, as if unused to gestures he cannot hide behind practicality. He tells her that the new year once meant loss, fear, uncertainty. Now it means something else. It means beginning again. They do not speak of love in dramatic words. Instead, they talk about trust, about staying, about choosing each other not because survival demands it, but because the heart now does. Mason admits that when he asked her to marry him, he expected respect, companionship, maybe even friendship. He did not expect this. Caroline feels the same truth mirrored inside her. No longer bound by desperation, she remains by choice. Their marriage becomes what it was never meant to be, but always had the potential to become. A love that grows slowly, stubbornly, honestly. As winter fades into spring, the valley awakens. Streams thaw and run bright and cold. Calves stumble into new life. Grass pushes through leftover snow. Silver Ridge becomes a living thing again, pulsing with hope rather than fear. And the people working there, every rider, every cook, every hand, feel that shift. It is not only the land that has transformed, it is the heart at the center of it. Word spreads, not of scandal, but of strength, of integrity, of a ranch run not by ego, but by unity. People respect that in ways wealth never commands. One morning, as the sun breaks gold across the mountains, Caroline stands beside Mason at the porch rail. The last traces of ice glitter like stars fallen to earth. They do not need to say what this place now means to them. Silver Ridge is more than acreage, more than livestock, more than legacy. It is the proof that two people can fight the world and win, not through dominance, but through refusal to surrender their humanity. The new year has come and gone, but its promise remains. Caroline Dawson Hale is no longer the desperate girl who bartered her future in the snow. She is a woman who stepped into the unknown and built something real. Mason Hale is no longer the guarded rancher waiting for loss. He is a man who finally understands that strength does not mean standing alone. Together they move forward, not into certainty, but into shared choice, and that is enough. As the seasons turn and Silver Ridge survives the winter, the ranch becomes more than land and shelter. It becomes a testament to endurance and the courage to begin again. Caroline and Mason never planned for love. Their marriage began as a bargain made in desperation, one shaped by duty and the sharp edge of necessity. But through hardship, loyalty, and quiet understanding, that bargain transforms into something deeper. They learn that true partnership is not about ownership or sacrifice, but about standing side by side when the world demands surrender. The battles with Leonard Hale reveal corruption and greed, yet they also reveal integrity, resilience, and the power of choosing what is right even when the cost is great. Caroline grows into her voice and strength. Mason learns to trust and open his heart. Their love is not fragile illusion. It is built in work, in truth, in the shared rhythm of life beneath the mountains. And as the new year unfolds into spring, Silver Ridge stands as a symbol of healing, courage, and the quiet miracle of two people choosing each other again and again in a world that once tried to tear them apart. End of article. Good night.